The 361 is back. Oh boy. This is Kristian Dyer, and this is the Red Bulls Insider Podcast on MSGnetworks.com. Well, it's an exciting time now for the New York Red Bulls, winners of their past 3 in the league season. In addition to that, in the semifinals of the US Open Cup, and just a little bit of positivity, and all of a sudden, a Red Bulls season that was on the brink, turning things around. Well, Saturday's 3-0 win at Minnesota United FC, certainly going to be a talking point for a while. This was one of the most complete performances by the Red Bulls, and I think what's encouraging is, and fans are saying, you know, this wasn't necessarily unexpected. The Red Bulls did what they were supposed to do. Minnesota United's depleted, Gold Cup call-ups, so a lot of injuries going on, bad form right now for the expansion team, but got to give the Red Bulls credit here. They didn't sink down to the level of their opponent. In the past 2 years, we've seen an awful lot of that. The Red Bulls will be in good form, in a good way. In comes a team that they shouldn't have any sort of difficulty dispatching, and all of a sudden they come in and lay a dud. It's a scoreless draw. They play listless. They play flat, and in a difficult place to play. That is not great turf. It was a hot day. They did have to travel, you know, on the road, and it's a bit of a hostile environment up there. Minnesota's building something good off the field. The Red Bulls came out and did what they were supposed to do. They got a goal in the first half, 2 in the second half. They played the right way. Their movement was good, even with the turf and having played midweek. There was an awful lot of positives to take away from it. I think the biggest one is the fact that the Red Bulls came out and played against a lesser opponent, and that's what Minnesota is right now, a lesser opponent, and they played against them in that way. They took it to them. They absorbed some pressure early, and then they began to play high press, counter press, putting away their chances, winning the 50-50 balls, getting that second ball, that all-important second ball. They did the things that they wanted to do, and you've got the result against San Jose midweek. That was a drubbing. First half was a little bit more even than the 1-0 scoreline going into halftime would suggest, but the second half, they turned it up. They played the right way. The ball movement, the possession, the defensive shape, all things you want to see, and they continued with that now going into Saturday, and now what you would say is a winnable game coming up on Saturday at Red Bull Arena, a Montreal Impact team that's gone through some sputtering, some fits this year. They've had some problems defensively. They're trying to blend in some new players, and they've had some difficulty with that. This is now the chance for the Red Bulls, 7-1 in their last 2 games, goals for, goals against, to be able to continue this momentum. And I think you go into this 3-game stand, San Jose, then on the road in Minnesota, and then against Montreal on Saturday, and you were hoping that the Red Bulls would get 7 points from those 3 matches. Now all of a sudden you're looking at a team that could potentially be 3 wins from their last 3 matches during this stretch. It'd be 4 overall, and 3 games over 500 for the first time all season. If that's not momentum, that's not the right trajectory. You know, it certainly is beginning to look and feel like the Red Bulls teams of the past 2 years. And let's give a lot of credit to the results in the US Open Cup, beating New York City FC in their opening round, then Philadelphia, then New England. As important as it may be to advance to the finals of this tournament, if nothing else, the Open Cup served as a springboard now for a better run of play. Now, I mean, the Red Bulls still have a lot of work to do. They're above that red line, but they're in 5th place in the Eastern Conference. They need to do some things in terms of being able to solidify a top 2, top 3 slot. But it's not as far-fetched as it was this time a month ago, where the thought would be maybe the Red Bulls would have to fight their way through to get into the playoffs. Now they're showing the form of a playoff team, and certainly there's some other reasons for optimism. It looks like the Red Bulls will be making 2 signings relatively shortly, whether it's this week or perhaps next week, depending on international visas and clearances and ITCs and FIFA paperwork and everything else. Fidel Escobar, the Panamanian center back, 5'11", not necessarily that prototypical size that the Red Bulls had brought in for a central defender, but he is somebody who has played at a very high level in the Gold Cup, been incredibly solid with his club team in Panama. He's in the early 20s. He covers a lot of ground, moves forward very well. You talk about the things that Jesse Marsch would like from his ideal center back. Certainly, Fidel Escobar fits that mold. And I know there's going to be questions about his height, but if you're playing in that 3-6-1 that I alluded to just a few moments ago in the show's openings, you've got an Aaron Long and an Aurelian Collin out there as 2 of the 3 center backs in that formation. Then what you're potentially looking at is Fidel Escobar, who may not be as good in the air, but can cover a bit more ground, something that this team needs. So the concerns about height, he's still a young player in his early 20s. There might be a growth spurt left in him, or maybe 2, but he covers ground, he reads the game well, and he's proven at the CONCACAF level. This is a guy who's in the starting 11 for a Panama team that I think might have a good chance to qualify for the World Cup as the 4th team out of CONCACAF going into that playoff scenario. So that would certainly be an interesting scenario for the Red Bulls, to say the least, to see his development and how he can assimilate in. The other players, Mohamed Keita, and speaking with people in the organization over the past week, they're excited about this guy. They think that out wide he can be a special player. He brings pace to a midfield that can be a little pedestrian in terms of overall pace from time to time. He can stretch things, get behind a back line. He can play up top if they go back to the dreaded 4-2-2-2. He can also play centrally, which he did with Stabæk in Norway as well. So he brings some position versatility, either wing, as a number 10, potentially as a stopgap if need be, but also up top as well. 26, 27 years old, has a good pedigree in terms of his success in Norway, as well as with the Norwegian youth national teams, under 17s, under 20, under 23 national team. So I think this could be an exciting player right there. I spoke with Bob Bradley a few days ago about it, who managed Keita in Norway, said that he thinks he's a good, solid player, thinks he could fit into the Red Bulls team and what Jesse Marsch is doing. And keep in mind here, the connection that Bob Bradley would have with Jesse Marsch, who he coached with the Chicago Fire and at Chivas USA. He then brings Marsch on board as his assistant with the United States national team, and Dennis Hamlet. Hamlet was an assistant on those Chicago Fire teams that won an MLS Cup, won multiple US Open Cups. So Bradley's had his hand in the development of both Hamlet and Marsch, certainly as coaches, and to a certain extent as players as well. So, I think the fact that Bob Bradley probably gave a positive review of Mohamed Keita would certainly seem to indicate that this is somebody who can come in to the MLS level. But both signings could be available. I'm guessing probably not in time for this weekend. It doesn't sound that way from what I'm hearing, but hey, there have been surprises before, and certainly this is two players who will be coming in. They've gone through the whole medical process last week at the Red Bulls training facility. 2 players who can come in and make a difference now as we turn the calendar page to August, and adding depth, but also adding some different components to the team, not just for 2017. I think these moves were as much about this season as they are about next year. Young players, players who can play in the high press, who can counter press, who have speed, and a certain amount of tactical ability where the Red Bulls are a little thin right now. So that's going to be something to watch, just their assimilation for this year. But to not get hung up on that, 2017 might be the year where you bring in these guys fully and can get them to really get going, hit the ground running with the benefit of a full preseason. So, monologue over. Coming up, we're going to have Tony Meola, member of the U.S. Soccer Hall of Fame, man who has triple-digit appearances with the United States national team, one of the first ever signings of the MetroStars back in 1996. And people forget, Meola also played for the Red Bulls around the time when Red Bulls purchased this organization and went through the whole rebranding process. He had a lot of his success with Sporting Kansas City as well, a possible U.S. Open Cup opponent for the Red Bulls down the road, and somebody who, with his work that he does for Sirius XM, with Fox Sports 1, and with the national team setup, I think certainly brings a unique perspective on Bruce Arena, a former Red Bulls head coach, on the status of the U.S. national team here with this recent Gold Cup run and what they've been able to do with the B/C level squad. I'm going to ask him about Tyler Adams. I'm guessing Tyler Adams is going to come up in the conversation, but want to talk with him because he has some insight on Tyler from the under-17s, under-18s, and then the under-20 national team with Tab Ramos. And, just maybe we can even get a memory or two out of Tony Meola. So Tony Meola coming up next on the Red Bulls Insider Podcast. And now we've got a very exciting guest here coming up on the Red Bulls Insider Podcast. It is Tony Meola, former MetroStars and Red Bulls goalkeeper, one of the most decorated players in MLS history, now with Sirius XM and Fox Sports 1, and also U.S. Soccer Hall of Famer as well. Tony, did I get everything in there?
Every sentence made me feel older, by the way. Every time you got it in there. Thank you.
Well, I got to go back to a memory first before we go into anything, but I was in high school, sophomore in high school, and I won an essay contest in 1998. That it was a Bic Pens did an essay contest to go to a clinic with several MetroStars players, and you were the goalkeeper with the MetroStars at the time, and you took me aside just kind of on your own and gave me some advice on my punting, and it made me the Division III goalkeeper that I am today.
I'm glad I could help elevate the game back in the day.
It was great though, and for a high school guy who wanted to play in college, and I did end up going off to play at Montclair State. Just the confidence from being able to say someone like a Tony Meola who's done so much in the game. That was a neat moment for me as a high school kid.
I appreciate that. Thanks for sharing that.
I'm still shanking my punts, though, so we need to sit down on that. I want to ask you, though, before we go into Red Bulls and MLS topics, specifically your thoughts on the U.S. national team now under Bruce Arena. I think it's kind of Bruce's team now. He's certainly put his identity, his mark on it. A stark contrast from the Jurgen Klinsmann era, where I thought there was a lot of bold talk, but very little bit in terms of results.
Well, we compare the two guys just in general, right? Two different people, two different types of managers. In Jurgen, you had a guy that was constantly challenging players. You got to get better. You got to, it's not good enough to be here. You need to go to Europe. You need to test yourself at the top clubs. And that was the message that we received, at least from the outside looking in. And of course, I have the insight of a few guys in camp over the years, and now you have a guy in Bruce Arena that probably feels all of those exact same things, and probably feels, and I'm sure he does. I've known him forever. He was my college coach. I met him when I was in high school while he was recruiting John Harkes. Although the message is or the result Bruce wants is the same, I think the message might be a little bit different. And Bruce's way of doing things, I've said for years, Bruce is the best man manager that I've had. And what I mean by that is that Bruce makes you feel like you're good enough, and people, I've been talking about Bruce since the day he got back into the job. And the best way I can describe him, Kristian, is that if you're a player at a level 7, Bruce will get you to a level 9 just by talking you into it.
And do you think that Bruce kind of coming in the way that he has. He's got the clout from MLS, right? He's won all those titles, took the U.S. on that magical run in 2002. You were a part of that World Cup roster in 2002. Do you think he has what it takes to, again, kind of find that right balance with, you got some of the veteran guys, it might be the last run for a Clint Dempsey and a Tim Howard, certainly, but you got some of the young players coming up now from that under-20 World Cup. Do you see Bruce being able to blend that squad and find something similar to that? Or is this a squad that maybe is going to have to max out with who they're at and then begin eyeing 2022 for those young guys?
Well, I think Bruce's mission is 2018. And I'm sure, even though the likelihood of him being around is not very, probably not very high after 2018, I'm sure he's going to want to leave U.S. soccer in a good state. Of that U20 team, I'm not sure how many guys will really be part of it when it's all said and done. But what Bruce will do, you mentioned Clint Dempsey, and he's one of the guys, along with Tim Howard, that's on the sort of their last run with the national team. And he just has a way of blending guys into this. And I think you've seen here in this Gold Cup, there's probably been conversations behind closed doors with Clint and said, hey, in this particular game, we're going to need you to come off the bench. And that's what we saw the other night. And we're going to need you. You're equally as important to this team in that role tonight as you are as a starter in another game. And Bruce is very willing to have those conversations. And I'm sure, look, every player wants to play, but, as a manager and in Bruce's position, you have to manage those situations. And I just think at the moment, he's absolutely the right guy to do that job.
Want to ask you about someone on the national team who came up kind of through this MetroStars / Red Bulls setup here, and that was Michael Bradley, who was on the team when it was the MetroStars and then when it was sold to the Red Bulls. What is his legacy? And I mean, there's still a lot to be written, but as of this week here in late July 2017, what is Michael Bradley's legacy with the national team? He's a guy who gets an awful lot of criticism, I would say unfairly so, but what do you see from Michael Bradley and where he's going to stack up someday among the all-time greats?
Yeah, he's a guy, you're absolutely right. He's a guy that for some reason, if he does something wrong, people want to magnify it by 10. And there's been stretches, there's no doubt, where Michael hasn't been good. And there's been stretches where he's been outstanding, but for the most part, it's been more outstanding than poor for Michael Bradley. And for whatever reason, as you mentioned, people like to look at him and rip his game apart one way or the other. But I still think, and I think many people within the national team think that this team kind of goes as Michael Bradley goes. And when he's not on the field, it's a different team. And he's the captain of this team. We saw what he did. I mean, what he did against Mexico, and okay, it's a once-in-a-lifetime type goal, but in those moments, I think is when you find out, just like Clint Dempsey against Costa Rica coming in as a sub with the two moments that he had, one to set up Josie Altidore on the goal, and then the free kick. It's those moments that make those guys special, and it just blows my mind how hard people are on him. But look, everyone's got an opinion. Mine just happens to be that the national team goes as Michael Bradley goes.
And you talk about Michael Bradley, someone who came to this New York organization as a teenager. There's another teenager right now on the Red Bulls that's making some waves. And we spoke a few moments ago about the Under-20 World Cup. That's Tyler Adams. You saw Tyler a couple weeks ago in that New York Derby match. What are your thoughts on Tyler? And should this be the last year that Tyler Adams, is in MLS?
Well, I'll start at the end. That part of it, whether he stays or whether he goes, I mean, that's really up to what Tyler Adams decides to do. Tyler Adams is getting better as a Red Bull and will continue to get better as he gets minutes with Red Bull. And so with that part of it, if his desire is to go to Europe, then go to Europe. If it's to stay here, stay here. Either way, he's going to continue to improve. If he does go to Europe, my recommendation would be like we've seen some other guys who have made good decisions, some who haven't, you got to get in a place where you're playing. You can't go from playing to sitting on the bench anywhere because that just doesn't help you. You're not going to get better that way. With regards to Tyler as the player, obviously we know what happened at Red Bull. He, for me, and I've said from day one, he's the reason why they felt comfortable enough to get rid of Dax McCarty, and the fact that they made that decision shows that they see an upside to the kid that can help their team win. I've had him with the U18s. Unfortunately, we had him only for one camp with the U18s because as we played our U19 and Brett Friedel's team, he came to dinner right after the game and said, "I'm stealing him." And he's now coming with the U19s. So we didn't get to we got to see him play. We didn't get to work with him all that much. And then Brad will tell you the same story because as soon as Tab saw him with the U20s a week later, Brad Friedel no longer had him with the U19s because he was playing with the 20s. So you can see what people think about him. And we saw in the World Cup he covers a lot of ground, still has a lot of tactical stuff to learn. But that stuff will come. He's gotten by for so long on just this gift as an athlete and being able to cover that much ground. So when you make a mistake, you always feel like you can recover and you feel like you can retrieve the ball back and win a ball back. At the higher levels, it becomes more difficult. But that part will come just by being in games. But he's one of the ones when people ask who would you put your stamp on, top 3, 4 sort of special players in the future. He's one of those guys you look at.
Crazy for me to say that he reminds me a little bit of one of your former teammates, John O'Brien.
John O'Brien, yeah, that's a good one. Johnson wasn't as athletic and probably was a little bit cleaner on the ball, but the same type of player. The other one that comes to mind for me is Chris Armas, the guy who's working with him every day right now on the Red Bull staff. And probably, as much as Jesse's gonna pull the strings and do all that stuff and played in the middle of the field, my guess is Tyler Adams works with Chris Armas more than anybody. And Chris Armas, and I've spoken to him about this, and we've had these conversations. He takes as much pride in seeing that position grow as any, especially with the way that they like to press. So, Dax mentioned this when I used to talk to him about Chris, and I would imagine, and we're not there every day, but I would imagine that's extended to Tyler Adams as well.
Well, I hope he doesn't get too much of the Chris Armas influence because Chris was the first guest ever on this podcast, and he told me Long Island pizza is better than Jersey pizza. I can't let go of that. So, not everything that Chris Armas says is the gospel truth, Tony.
Yeah, everyone has their faults, Kristian.
Well, we can both agree on Nona's pizza before Red Bulls games. That is a fact, tried and true, no matter what Chris Armas says. What do you like that Dax McCarty trade? It sounds, it was controversial, right? You're giving up the captain, longest tenured player, someone who was kind of on the cusp of the national team the past couple years, has now maybe solidified a spot, at least right now as of this summer. Red Bulls got a fair amount, $400,000 in allocation money, $200,000 this year, $200,000 coming in next year. So they got something in return, but they lost something in Dax McCarty. Do you think it was the right trade in January 2017 for moving forward?
I'm a fan of it if I were a Chicago Fire fan. I just think, and again, the numbers you throw out, first of all, we don't really know what those numbers mean, right? Because we don't have a history in TAM and general allocation money until we see what happens a couple of years from now, and they're just numbers to me. We don't know what $400,000 is worth for a player. I think if you ask Chicago right now, I'm going to guess that they're going to estimate that it's pretty dang good the way it's going. Look, they made a decision to go younger, which is okay. I think sometimes when you do that, you're setting yourself up to lose something on the other end. And there's no doubt, and Jesse and players talked about it. There was something missing early on, and there was a learning curve. And I know they started with a new formation, this 4-2-2-2 that they were going to, and there was a learning curve there. They've gotten back to what they really are, and that's 4 with 3 in the middle of the field and guys up top and out wide who pressure the ball. But Dax was great in that system. Now you got to reteach it. It's such an important part of their system that they ripped that out a little bit. But look, they made the trade. Now they go forward with it. And I think you're starting to see them play a little bit better within that system, and hopefully for Red Bull fans that continues. What
do you make of this new look Red Bulls now under Marsh for a couple years, kind of eschewing the big names, and you were there at the beginning of the Red Bull era. You were also there at the beginning of the MetroStars era, Tony, when there were a lot of big names coming in. I mean, with the MetroStars, you had a Donadoni, you had Diavola, Tab, what was a pretty big name, Bronco coming in for a while. And then with the Red Bulls, once the designated player rules came along, you had a Claudio and a Juan Pablo, a Thierry, Tim Cahill, Rafa Marquez, the list goes on and on. Now it seems like they're going in the different direction, not as big names, more balance in the squad, but maybe come playoff time, they lack that difference maker. And I go back to the Columbus series 2 years ago, Higuain and Kai Kamara were the difference makers in knocking out the Red Bulls. Last year in Montreal, it was a Piatti type, those big name, pricey sort of players coming in and knocking them out. Is there too much balance in the squad, and has this squad maybe gone too far away from the big names and the difference makers as teams now are starting to add more of those pieces, those prominent pieces?
Well, I think it's certainly a difference in philosophy, and we have examples in MLS. You look at what Sporting Kansas City, for example, has done in not having big names. You look at what Dallas has done in not having big names. Now, the issue for Dallas now is, can they win something? And I think that's kind of where Red Bull is now. Red Bull is sort of in their first year and a half of this new system, this new way of doing things, and only time will tell. But there are examples on the other side. There's the LA Galaxy example. There's obviously you talk about in the playoffs having big guys step up, and you don't have to go too far. You look at last year, Seattle getting to the playoffs, and then a guy like Ladero, their top DP, or one of the top two. Dempsey wasn't playing at the time. He now makes a difference in Toronto. The big guys, Giovinco and Bradley and Josie, have made a difference. So it's a difference in philosophy. What it shows is that there's no one right or wrong way to do it. You just have to have guys that are bought into what you're doing. It didn't. You look at it. Okay, there were some wins. When Red Bull had big names, and there were some minor victories, some the supporter shield, I think that was it, right? In Red Bull history, they haven't won an MLS Cup, so you look at it and can we do it a different way? And I think that's what we're seeing here.
Want to go back into 1996, and when you're looking at that roster before that opening game in Los Angeles at the Rose Bowl, I know there were probably some names where you said, who is this guy? But you're looking at the addition of a Donadoni coming in. You've got Tab ready to join that roster in a few weeks. Are you thinking, you've got Peter Vermees on that team too, Curricula, who was a big Serie A name at the time. Were you thinking this is the team that's the front runner to win the first ever MLS Cup?
Yeah, I don't know that we thought that way because, like I said, I think when you go into a preseason, everyone's excited, but there were so many uncertainties. And it was early on, we got to the first game, if I'm being honest, we really didn't know who we were. I mean, preseason, the coach back then tried everything that you could possibly try. I think we got to that first game, and we were just kind of winging it, to be completely honest with you. We didn't really know who we were at all. But most teams were probably like that. And then you mentioned you got guys who are playing that probably 2 weeks from now, when other guys came in, weren't going to be part of the group. So it was really, really difficult. But we did, in the end, had enough talent. We just didn't have enough time to put it together. Carlos Quiroz came in after 8 games, and then the whole merry-go-round of coaches. It used to blow my mind that there was such a quick trigger there all the time. But that's just the way the organization was run, and it did make it difficult. but there was no lack of talent, that's for sure.
If you guys get by DC United in that playoff series in '96, you think you're the team in MLS Cup, and maybe you're the ones, instead of John Harkes, lifting that first ever trophy?
Yeah, it could have been. There's no doubt. They called a handball on Richie Williams, and we gonna get the penalty kick that we thought we deserved in that game, and we win the game in DC. And then there's a whole different story to write. But that's the beauty of our game, and sometimes the unfortunate beauty of the game. But no, I don't want to take anything away from DC United in that group, because if you look at the group that Bruce Arena put together. And how he managed that team. Keep in mind, a guy like Echeverry, who at the end of that year, then moving on to the next couple years, was almost impossible to play against. Bruce benched him for the first 6 or 8 games because he didn't think he was in shape enough. And who would have done that? What other manager in that league would have done that? I'm not quite sure that there were any. And that was part of the growth of that DC United team.
Yeah, and to think of it, if DC falls in that playoff series, we might not have Bruce Arena be the man he is today. 2002 World Cup, and now eyeing up 2018. Just the way, I guess, the ball bounces sometimes in this game.
Yeah, no doubt. Give him credit, right? The manager's job is to pull all the right strings, and that's what he did all the way to that final on that rainy day in New England.
Well, I do want to ask you one final question, Tony, and we appreciate it and love the stuff you do on Sirius XM and with Fox Sports 1. But looking ahead to MLS, when you go back 5 years, the amount of growth in this league's been incredible with the talent coming in, and you look at what an Atlanta United has done, and New York City FC, and all these new teams, kind of coming in and adding their own dynamic. What's the one area of concern you have if you were able to sit down with Don Garber for coffee and just say, I'm concerned about this with the league for the next 5 years as we move into this next era, this next phase of the league? What's the area of concern you have as someone who played in the league since '96 and has been highly involved in MLS ever since?
Well, the one constant concern has always been, how do we get young American players time, right? How do we get, and of course there are some clubs that are committed to having young players play, but are they young American players? And I don't know that there's a real solution to it. I just think it's an overall concern. There's an overall concern that we continue to bring in great foreign players, and we need those players in the league, just like the EPL needs foreign players. Think of the EPL without foreign players. Think of single teams in the EPL without foreign players. They're vital to the growth of the league. They're vital to the growth of the entertainment value. But how do we get young players minutes? And that's always going to be a concern. And the other things, obviously, second is, how do we keep those players that are almost forced to go to Europe in order to make the living that they think they deserve? And that part's getting better. That part has improved, continues to improve. I think we're going to see next year again, there's going to be some major stuff moving forward that will improve that as well. But again, development of players in our league has to be vital. And it's not every owner's concern to do that. Their concern is, how do I build my team? If I'm the owners of Red Bull, how do I build my team? How do I figure that part out? They've happened to have given some young players wheel. You mentioned Tyler Adams, guys like that. A Matt Miazga was there before, a Tim Reen before that. So they've given, Red Bull has, for the most part, done their job in giving those opportunities. But we don't see it everywhere in the league, and that's a little bit concerning.
All right, I said it was going to be the final question, but you brought up Matt Miazga, so we got to do half a question here.
Yeah.
Where is he this fall, Tony? You think he's with Chelsea, or are the rumblings of this guy going on loan? Where do you think that Matt Miazga is going to be playing for the 2017-2018 season?
I think he's out of Chelsea. I'm not quite sure.
Permanently, or just on a loan?
No, I think, look, Chelsea, keep in mind, has more players on loan than they have in their first team. Right, it's a business model for them where they've got last year they had 29 players out on loan, if I'm correct, at one point or another, and I think Matt Miazga is a guy on loan. I think when you look at the guys that they're able to bring in, one spot is locked up already because Tim Cahill is now the club captain there, and it's a guy that will be there for a long time, right? So one center back spot is completely taken for quite some time. You got David Luiz who's there. You've got the ability to bring in whoever you want into that team, and you have to be convinced that you're going to be one of the three center backs that they're going to use throughout the year. And I just don't know that's how they're looking at him. But having said that, Matt Miazga and his path, he is lucky that he's at a place in a lot of ways that will give him the opportunity to go on loan, will give him the chance to go play instead of sitting there. And he's had a nice stint at Vitesse, but playing 2 games in a season at Chelsea is really not going to get him any better. So hopefully he'll have that opportunity.
You think it's EPL, Germany, Holland?
I think I'm thinking Holland. Holland, and you saw his play in one game with the national team. One of the issues with Matt was he wasn't a very good passer of the ball at all. And what did everybody talk about after one game of playing in the Gold Cup? Was the fact that they thought he now had a very good game with the ball, right? So, okay, you can make an argument, maybe lesser players, all of that stuff, but the reality is he was better with the ball than not. So, kudos to him. I would guess it's the environment that he's in every day. The Dutch have historically been known to get it done, and then he goes and gets himself a goal in the end that helps the U.S. win the group, so that never hurts either.
No, certainly a clutch goal, and you have to like the fact that I ran into Matt in January, and level-headed, certainly not a big head, huge Adam's apple, but not a big head. So good to see that Matt Miazga. He is a good kid. He works hard. He does things the right way. Early to bed, early to rise type. And, it's going to be exciting to see where Matt Miazga ends up. And it's been exciting to have the legendary Tony Meola here on the Red Bulls Insider Podcast. Tony, thanks for joining us.
Hey, pleasure. Thanks for having me, man.
Great stuff there from Tony Meola. And again, if you don't listen to him on Sirius XM, does a great show. It's drive time for a lot of us here in the New York City area and on the East Coast. Reason enough to sign up for a Sirius XM subscription. Their soccer coverage and the amount of coverage and time they give to MLS has grown exponentially over the past few years. So that's exciting to see. And Tony does a great job, whether he's with an Eric Winalda as a partner or Ziggy Schmidt or whoever might be coming in. Certainly good stuff from Tony Meola. And I liked it. And we talked about it in the opening intro and then during the interview, but just the role and development of Tyler Adams. And I think Tony nailed it when he said, Tyler shouldn't be in a rush to leave MLS. He's getting better, and he's going to continue to get better, and wait for it. He's going to continue to get better with the Red Bulls. And I think you're seeing a player in Tyler Adams who's a great fit, not just on the field. We can talk about the physical skill, the ability that he has, but off the field. He's someone who wants to get better. He's somebody who, certainly brings the right mentality. And we mentioned it with Matt Miazga. First one to the practice facility, one of the last ones to leave. Matt Miazga was that way. Tyler Adams is very much that way. And whether he's in Europe or whether he's here in MLS with the Red Bulls, Tyler Adams is going to be pushing himself to get better because that's the kind of player he is. And the Red Bulls have a real gem on and off the field with Tyler Adams. And I don't know if you picked up on this listening, but could you hear a little bit of the pain from Tony talking about that playoff series in 1996 against DC United? Ball bounces a different way. Richie Williams gets called for that handball, and we're talking about potentially the MetroStars winning MLS Cup in 1996. And then how does that set them up? The next year does Carlos Queiroz, who took over mid-season for the very unsuccessful Eddie Firmani with the MetroStars, does Queiroz not leave for a big payday in Japan and decide to stick around and see what he can build with the MetroStars? Do the MetroStars become the team and the organization that DC United was? Could they build around Roberto Donadoni? Could they add some pieces? Would they have more international clout? Certainly, like DC was able to do with winning those championships, those MLS Cups in 96, 97 at a sold-out RFK Stadium, winning again, in 1999, and then winning the Intercontinental Cup and the success they were able to have in what was the old CONCACAF Champions League, which was a much different format back then. But would you be talking about a team and a franchise trajectory that'd be very different for the MetroStars and now the Red Bulls if you had that initial MLS Cup in 1996? Interesting stuff to think about, and certainly great stuff from Tony Meola. Give him a follow on Twitter. You're not going to regret it.